This is a fictional story, created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, names, places, or events is purely coincidental. The case I'm bringing to the channel today is unbelievable. It starts with something as simple as a broken phone, but it ends with a 6-year marriage destroyed. It all happened when this woman's husband asked to borrow her phone because his had died. He promised he'd log out, but he forgot. And what she found in his messages days later was devastating. Even more shocking. She says she doesn't regret what she did afterward. Before we dive into the story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like to support our work. Important notice: this is a fictional story, originally written by me for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real events or real people is purely coincidental. But so you can understand it better and really feel what the character went through, I'm going to narrate what happened next in first person, as the protagonist. I promise you're going to love it. And if you don't, the editor is getting fired. I found my husband's secret group chat. He was humiliating me for years. Some couples look completely normal from the outside until one tiny, stupid thing exposes that everything has been rotting under the surface for years. That is pretty much how my marriage ended, except the tiny thing was not really tiny. It was a group chat, a stupid little digital room full of men in their late 30s who never really left college emotionally, and apparently used my life as casual entertainment whenever they got bored. If you had told me a few years ago that I would blow up a 6-year marriage because of screenshots, I probably would have laughed and said I was not that dramatic. Turns out I am exactly that dramatic, and honestly, I am proud of it now in a way I never thought I would be. I am Noelle, by the way. I am 47, which somehow sounds older when I say it out loud than it feels in my head. And until a few years ago, I was married to a man 5 years younger than me. When we met, people thought it was cute. He loved telling everyone he had always gone for older women because they were more mature and knew what they wanted. I thought that was a compliment back then. Now it just sounds like something someone says when they want the benefits of a grown woman without actually having to act like a grown man. When we started dating, he already had this tight little group of friends from college, all of them loud and charming and a little too interested in each other's lives. I told myself it was nice that he had people. I did not realize how much power those people had over him and, by extension, over me. Back then, my own life was very simple. I worked as an office manager at a medical clinic in a mid-sized city in the United States. Nothing glamorous, just endless phone calls and insurance forms, and trying to keep everybody's schedule from collapsing. I had my own little apartment, my own small car, my own routine of frozen dinners and late-night shows. I had friends from work, a mother who lived in another state and called too much, and a father who called too little but always showed up when it really mattered. I was not one of those women who dreamed about a big wedding or a picture-perfect family. I just wanted stability, someone kind, someone who would not make my life harder than it already was. When my future husband walked into my life, he looked like that person. He was funny in that effortless way that makes people lean toward you at parties. He remembered small details from our conversations and texted me things like, "How was that weird meeting with your boss?" the next day. He cooked better than I did, which, to be fair, was not hard but still felt impressive. He brought flowers to our third date and rolled his eyes at himself while handing them over like he knew it was corny and did not care. I felt seen in a way I had not felt in a long time, and I let that feeling wrap around me faster than I probably should have. The first time I met his friends, I could immediately tell they had their own ecosystem. They had stories I was not part of, phrases that made all of them laugh at once, grievances from things that had happened 15 years earlier that still came up like they happened last week. They worked in different fields now, but they treated adulthood like an annoying side quest that interrupted their main job of performing for one another. I sat at the table, listened, smiled, and did that thing where you try to find your place in a conversation that existed long before you arrived. They were friendly enough. One of them called me a good catch in front of everyone, and they all made noises of agreement while glancing at my husband, like he had scored something. That night on the drive home, my husband made some comment about how they all loved me already, and I believed him. It did not occur to me that loving me and respecting me were two different things. It also did not occur to me that he might care more about staying in their good graces than in mine. If I had understood that part sooner, I probably would have saved myself a lot of nights staring at the ceiling, wondering what was wrong with me. At first, the little comments did not even register as red flags. Someone joked about me robbing the cradle once, and everyone laughed, including me, because what else are you supposed to do when you are the only woman at a table full of men taking turns being clever? One of them asked if I was worried about being older than him in the long run, like when he still wanted to travel, and I just wanted to sit at home with a blanket and tea. I said something like, "You clearly have no idea how much I like traveling. and turned it into a joke. They told me I was very grounded for my age, which is one of those phrases you know is probably an insult but do not have the energy to unpack in the moment. I wish I could say I called it out right away. I did not. I had spent enough of my life being told I was too sensitive, too serious, too quick to take things personally. So I did the opposite. I tried to be the cool wife, the one who laughs off dumb jokes, who does not make a scene, who understands that guys will be guys, and all those tired phrases we get handed like we should frame them and hang them on the wall. At home, things were different, at least for a while. He would come home from his job in marketing, throw his tie on the couch, complain about some coworker who took credit for his idea, and then offer to cook dinner. We would stand at the counter together, chopping vegetables in our small kitchen, and it felt like we were on the same team. We had our own inside jokes, our own little rituals, like always splitting the last fry in the basket, even if both of us wanted it. When bills came in, we sat together at the table, opened them, and figured out how to pay them without falling behind. It looked like partnership, and in many ways it was. He knew I wanted kids. I did not hide that. I was not obsessed with the idea, but I also knew I did not want to look back years later and realize I had let my chance disappear, because I was waiting for the perfect time. There is never a perfect time. He said he wanted kids too, eventually, when things were more stable, when work settled down, when we had a little more money. Eventually stretched into years. Every time I brought it up, he said some version of, "Let us just get through this quarter." Or, "Once my bonus comes in, we can start talking seriously." Those quarters came and went. Bonuses came and went. My body did not. Around the time I turned 42, I went to my annual checkup, and my doctor asked gently if I still planned on trying to get pregnant. When I said yes, she did that little doctor pause where you can tell they are thinking carefully about how to phrase what comes next. She explained about declining fertility, about percentages and probabilities, about how the window was narrowing. I walked out of that office with a folder full of pamphlets and a knot in my stomach that would not go away. When I told my husband, he listened, nodded, and said all the right things. He said he wanted to be a dad, that he did not want to waste our chance, that we should at least talk to a specialist and see what our options were. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving in the same direction instead of just spinning in place. We made an appointment at a clinic. We sat in a waiting room full of women in paper gowns and couples holding hands and men pretending they were not uncomfortable. We listened to a doctor list out possibilities in a calm, practiced voice. The words washed over me in a blur. Medication, injections, procedures, success rates, timelines, costs. At some point, the doctor gently suggested that timing and medication were only going to take us so far and recommended we do a full cycle instead of just waiting for a miracle. We went through the whole process: egg retrieval, lab fertilization, the works, and a few of those embryos ended up frozen in a tank with our names on a label. The clinic called it storing them for future use. I called it a little folder in the back of my mind labeled maybe. The clinic asked us to track everything: cycles, temperatures, injections, appointments. My life turned into a color-coded calendar that lived on the fridge, next to our grocery list and random magnets from places we had visited. I stuck needles into my stomach and thighs, watched the bruises bloom into yellow and purple swirls, and told myself it would all be worth it when we were holding a baby. I went to blood tests before work and ultrasounds on my lunch break. My husband came to the big appointments, the ones where they adjusted medication or explained results, but he missed a lot of the smaller things. He said work was busy. He said he would make it up to me. I always believed him. The thing about being that focused on something is that it makes everything else feel sharper. Every comment clings to you in a way it might not have before. That is probably part of why his friends' jokes started slicing deeper. At one dinner, when they were all talking about vacations, one of them said, "You two should go on a trip before you are stuck at home with bottles and baby spit." Another jumped in with, "If that even works out, you know. Clock is ticking." He said it with a smirk, the kind of smirk that makes you want to throw your drink in someone's face even though you never would. My husband laughed and said, "Tell me about it." Like the whole thing was some shared joke about my aging uterus. Later that night, when I asked him why he said that, he shrugged. He said I was taking it too seriously, that he was just trying to keep the conversation light, that I did not want him to be the guy who could not take a joke, right? I tried to explain that my body was not a bit for him to use when he ran out of material, but the words felt heavy in my mouth. I could tell he thought I was making a big deal out of nothing, and I was so tired from all the appointments and hormones that I did not have the energy to fight about it for hours. So I dropped it. I wish I had not. There were other moments, small but sharp, that I ignored. The way he lit up when his friends complimented his job, his clothes, his new haircut, in a way he never seemed to when I did. The way he sometimes used a certain tone when talking about our life to them, almost like he was trying to lower expectations so that he would not look like he had settled too much. The way they sometimes referenced little personal details that I had never told them, which meant he had. I would hear something and think, that is weird. I did not know they knew that. And then force myself to move on. Then came the day with the phone. A stupid, ordinary Tuesday. His phone had been acting up for weeks, battery dying randomly, apps crashing, him banging it against his palm like that would fix anything. That morning, while we were both trying to get out the door, he said he could not get into his messaging app because it kept closing, and he had a full day of meetings. He asked if he could log into his account from my phone just for the day, in case something urgent comes up. I said, sure, handed him my phone while putting my shoes on, and watched him tap and swipe his way through the login. He handed it back a few minutes later, kissed me quickly, and said he would log out when he got home. I did not even think about it after that. My brain was already full of patient charts and appointment reminders, and whether I had enough gas in the car to make it to work and back without stopping. The day rolled forward like every other day. Nothing dramatic, nothing memorable. It is funny how normal everything feels right before your life shifts. A few days later, during my lunch break, I was sitting in my car in the clinic parking lot with a sandwich in my lap, doom scrolling on my phone the way we all do when we should be eating. I tapped open the messaging app to answer a friend and noticed a chat at the top with his name on it, like I was actively talking to myself. For a second, I thought the app had glitched. Then a new message came in with a notification preview that was clearly not written by me. It was something like, "You really put up with that?" followed by a laughing emoji. My stomach dropped before my brain even understood why. I opened the chat and realized his account was still logged in on my phone. The app started syncing messages, a flood of blue and gray bubbles loading all at once. His group chat with the guys right there in front of me. I could see their names, their little profile pictures, their stupid jokes. I could also see my own name popping up in the middle of it all, in ways that made my chest tighten. For maybe 10 seconds, I had this angel on my shoulder whispering, "Close it. Log out. This is none of your business." The other side said, "Your name is in there. That makes it your business. You already know which side won." My thumb hovered for a moment and then I scrolled up. Just a little at first, thinking I would glance, confirm it was nothing, and exit. Then I saw the first message that made my ears ring. "So how is married life with the project?" One of them had written. Underneath it, my husband had replied, "She is stable, predictable, a lot of work sometimes." There was a string of laughing emojis and a comment about how at least I did not blow up his phone when he went out. Another guy wrote, "You really locked yourself down early. Man, you could have aimed higher." And my husband answered, "Trust me, I think about that sometimes." I stared at that sentence so long the screen dimmed and I had to tap it to wake it up. From there, it just got worse. They talked about my age, about how it was now or never if we wanted kids, about how my baby obsession was killing the vibe. My husband joked about our appointments like they were some annoying hobby of mine he had been dragged into. He called me intense, controlling, boring. They compared me to other women in their lives. Ranking us like this was some unhinged contest. One of them wrote a whole paragraph about his girlfriend surprising him with a weekend away, and my husband answered with, "Must be nice. Mine thinks buying new sheets is a big treat." I had bought those sheets after a long week because I was trying to make our bed feel nicer while I was bruised and sore from injections. Apparently that was hilarious. I kept scrolling, and the timeline stretched back months. There were jokes about my clothes, my cooking, my job, times when I had vented to him about stress at the clinic, only to see those same words thrown into the chat later as if they were punchlines. I found messages from the night of that bar comment about people getting used to anything. He had written to them afterwards saying, "She looked like she was going to cry for a second, but I think she will get over it." One of them answered, "She always does. You have her wrapped." The way they talked about me made me feel like I was some kind of stubborn stain they could not believe he had not scrubbed out yet. At some point, my hands started shaking. I realized my sandwich was still sitting in my lap untouched, that I had crumbs on my skirt, that my break was almost over. Instead of closing the app, I opened the screenshot tool. I started capturing everything that felt significant. Fingers clumsy, but determined. Lines about him settling because I was loyal. Comments about me not being fun enough anymore. Jokes about him finding someone younger while we were still in treatment. I did not know exactly what I would do with those screenshots yet. I just knew that once I saw this, I could not unsee it. And I needed proof that I was not imagining it or being dramatic. When I had a folder full of images, I went a step further. I started a screen recording, scrolled slowly through older messages, and saved the video to my phone. Then I used a personal email to send everything to myself. Subject line something boring so it would not attract attention. It felt conspiratorial and pathetic and absolutely necessary all at once. The rest of my shift passed in a fog. I moved through rooms, talked to patients, answered phones, but it was like my real self was still parked in that car reading words I was never supposed to see. Every time a coworker asked if I was okay, I said I was just tired. That part was true. I was tired in a way that went beyond not sleeping enough, tired in a bone-deep way that comes from realizing the foundation of your life is not what you thought it was. By the time I drove home, the light was fading and my brain felt fried. I spent the whole drive trying to script what I would say. I kept changing the opening line in my head. I read your messages. We need to talk about your friends. How long have you been using me as content? Every version sounded either too dramatic or not dramatic enough. When I pulled into our driveway, my heart was pounding so hard it made me a little dizzy. Inside, everything looked painfully normal. There was music playing from a speaker in the kitchen, a pot on the stove, the faint smell of garlic and tomatoes in the air. His shoes were by the door, one tipped on its side like he had kicked them off in a hurry. He turned when he heard me, smiled, and walked over to kiss my cheek. "Hey," he said, like it was any other day. "Perfect timing. Dinner is almost ready. How was work?" I answered on autopilot. Some generic line about it being busy. I watched him stir the pot, move around the kitchen, talk about his day. I could feel myself splitting in two. One part of me was nodding and saying, "Uh-huh," and asking, "What did your boss say about the presentation?" And the other part was screaming silently that this man had told his friends he deserved better than me. We ate. I tasted nothing. I asked about his day. He asked about mine. He talked about a coworker who always cut corners. I told him about a patient who brought cookies for the staff. At one point, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand, said something about how we were due for good news from the clinic soon. I looked at our hands and thought about how that same hand had typed, "She is a lot sometimes," into a chat full of men who barely knew me. After we finished eating, he started stacking plates near the sink. That is when I said it. My voice surprised me because it came out steady, not shaky. "How long have you and your friends been talking about how I am not good enough for you?" He froze mid-step. "What?" he said, laughter already creeping into his tone like he thought this was some kind of joke or test. I picked up my phone, opened the app, and slid it across the table toward him with the group chat on the screen. "You left your account logged in on my phone," I said. I saw everything. The blood drained from his face so fast it would have been funny in any other context. His eyes flicked from the screen to me and back again. The first thing out of his mouth, of course, was, "You went through my messages?" Not, "I am sorry," or, "I can explain." Just immediate defensive outrage. I told him the truth. I told him the app had been syncing without me realizing, that I had opened it to talk to a friend, and suddenly our life was laid out in front of me in someone else's words. I said I should not have had to look to know how he talked about me when I was not in the room. I also told him I had screenshots and backups. I watched that land. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then did the thing he always did when he felt cornered. He tried to charm his way out. "It is not what you think," he said. "You know how those guys are. They make fun of everybody. It is just how we talk. It does not mean anything." I picked up my phone and read one of the messages aloud, the one where he said he asked himself why he had settled for me sometimes. "That sounds like it means something," I said. My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated that little crack because I could see him latch onto it as proof that I was too emotional. The argument spiraled from there. He kept trying to minimize what I had seen, saying it was just venting, that he needed a space to talk about relationship stuff without me there, that everyone complains about their partner sometimes. I asked him if everyone also calls their partner basic, and jokes about leaving them for someone younger while they are in the middle of fertility treatment. He said I was twisting his words. I told him his words were twisted before I ever saw them. At one point he tried to flip it and accused me of invading his privacy. That part almost made me laugh. The way someone who has been caught cheating will suddenly act like the real crime is that you looked at their phone. I told him I would feel guilty if the messages had been about something private and difficult and vulnerable. They were not. They were about him throwing me under the bus over and over to entertain a group of men who probably could not have picked my favorite color out of a lineup. Eventually, the yelling died down, mostly because I stopped responding to half his lines. I sat there, breathing hard, pulse pounding, and this weird calm settled over me. It was like all the love and hurt and confusion had burned up, and what was left was something very simple. I realized there was nothing he could say in that moment that would make this okay. There was no version of events where he had genuinely respected me, and all of this was just a misunderstanding. So I did something I never thought I would do. I gave him an ultimatum, not in a dramatic movie way, just in a very clear, almost bored voice. "You are going to pick," I said. "You either call each one of them right now, leave that group chat, tell them you were wrong, cut off those friendships, and show me that you understand how deeply you messed up, or we are done. Tonight." There is no middle ground. There is no, "let me think about it." It is them or our marriage. He stared at me like I had grown another head. "You cannot ask me to do that," he said. "Those friendships have been in my life for almost 2 decades. They have been there through everything. Have they been there injecting hormones into their bodies so you can have a child?" I asked. "Have they been there paying half the clinic bills? Have they been there listening to you cry on the bathroom floor when you thought you were not enough?" Because I was. He kept complaining that I was being unreasonable, that I was asking him to cut off his entire support system, that any therapist would tell me that was unhealthy. I thought about the way that support system had encouraged him to see me as less than, to treat me like a joke, to downplay my pain. I told him I did not care what any therapist would say about cutting out friends. I cared about the fact that they did not respect me and that he did not defend me. Actually, that he joined in. We went back and forth like that for what felt like hours. He tried to bargain. "What if I just see them less?" No. "What if I stop talking about you in the chat?" No. "What if we go to couples counseling and you bring this up there?" No. The whole time I could feel something inside me holding the line, refusing to be talked down this time. Finally, he said the quiet part out loud. "I am not going to throw away my closest friendships because you cannot take a joke," he snapped. There it was. The truth in one neat sentence. Something in me went very still. "Okay," I said. "Then we are done." I got up, went to the bedroom, and pulled a suitcase from the closet. He followed me, still talking, still trying to convince me that I was being dramatic, that I would regret this, that I was throwing away our life over some texts. I folded clothes, grabbed my toiletries, pulled my folder of clinic paperwork from the drawer where we kept important documents. My hands shook, but I kept going. I did not leave that night because it was late and I did not have anywhere lined up to go, but I might as well have. I slept on the edge of the bed, fully clothed, his back turned to me. In the morning, I called one of my coworkers, a woman I trusted, and asked if I could stay with her for a while. She did not ask a million questions. She just said, "Of course," and texted me her address. Within a few days, I had moved some essentials into her guest room. I was 43 by then, old enough to know better and still young enough to feel completely lost starting over again. I called the clinic and asked to pause our treatment. When the nurse asked gently, "Are you sure?" I said yes and managed not to cry until I hung up. I emailed a therapist whose name I had written down months earlier but never contacted because I kept telling myself things were not that bad. It turns out, not that bad does not hold up very well once you have proof. My husband did what people like him always do when they feel their image slipping. He started controlling the story. He told his family and our mutual friends that I had invaded his privacy, found a few harmless venting texts, and decided to blow up our marriage because I could not handle how men talk. He painted himself as devastated, blindsided, confused. He left out the part where he had been using me as material for years. People's reactions were predictable. Some of his friends took his side without hesitation, which did not surprise me. A few mutual acquaintances sent me messages like, "I heard what happened. I am so sorry you are going through this. I hope you two can work it out." My mother, when she found out, immediately went into fix-it mode. She called to tell me that marriages go through hard times, that men say stupid things, that I should be careful not to throw away something real over ego. I did not bother trying to explain the difference between ego and self-respect to her. She grew up in a time when women were expected to swallow anything to keep a ring on their finger. My father was different. He called me quietly, asked how I was, asked if I was safe, and then, in that steady voice of his, asked me to tell him exactly what had happened. I could hear pots clanging in the background on his end, like he was making dinner while trying to process that his daughter's life was falling apart. I told him about the phone, the group chat, the messages. I told him about the ultimatum, about my husband choosing his friends. I tried to keep my voice even, but it cracked in places, and I hated that it made me sound weaker than I felt. He did not interrupt. He just listened. A few days later, my dad came over. We sat at the small table in my coworker's kitchen, 2 mugs of coffee between us, and I opened my laptop. I pulled up the folder where I had saved the screenshots and the screen recording. I did not want to do it. Honestly, there is something humiliating about having your own pain laid out in front of someone you love, especially a parent. But I was tired of people acting like I had overreacted. He read slowly. Every now and then, he would squint, lean closer, scroll back up to reread something. I watched his face change from confusion to anger to something like disgust. At one point, he took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose, which he always did when he was trying not to say something he would regret later. When he finished, he closed the laptop and sat there for a moment in silence. "Okay," he finally said. "I understand. No lecture. No, are you sure you want to get divorced?" Just that. Then he asked if he could borrow my phone. I handed it to him. He stepped outside to make a call, and even though he tried to lower his voice, I heard enough through the thin walls to know exactly who he was talking to. He told my almost ex-husband that he had seen the messages, that there was no excuse for the way he had spoken about me, that he did not want to hear any nonsense about jokes or venting. He said he would not tell me what to do with my marriage, but as far as he was concerned, the man on the other end of the line was no longer welcome at any family gathering. Then he ended the call with a simple, cold goodbye. When he came back inside, he squeezed my shoulder and changed the subject to something mundane, because he knew I had reached my emotional limit for the day. After that, the narrative in my family shifted. My mother still thought I was being extreme, but she stopped saying it out loud as much because my father, the quiet one, had very clearly taken a side. Some relatives who had previously told me to forgive and forget sent messages about how they had not realized how cruel the comments were. It did not magically make everything okay, but it helped to know I was not completely alone. The divorce process itself was exactly what you would expect. Slow, expensive, draining. We did not have kids, which kept it from turning into a full nightmare. But we did have a house together. We put it on the market and spent months going back and forth about offers and repairs and closing dates. He wanted more money out of the sale because he was the one who had done the yard work and handled the renovations, as if I had not been working extra shifts to pay for those renovations. In the end, the law did not care about who watered the lawn. It cared about whose names were on the deed. When the house finally sold, the closing felt like signing the last page of a book I never wanted to read again. I handed over the keys, signed some documents, and walked out of the office with a check that represented both my freedom and the years I would never get back. I used part of the money to put down a deposit on a small apartment in a quieter part of town. It was not fancy, but it was mine. I bought a couch that I actually liked instead of one that could fit a football team, because I no longer had to consider his weekly game nights. In the middle of all that, there was the matter of the clinic. Their frozen reminders of everything we had tried to build were still sitting in storage, literally. One afternoon, a few weeks after the closing, I got a call from the clinic's billing department about renewal fees for storage. The woman on the phone asked if we wanted to keep everything stored for another year. I sat there on my new couch, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and realized I was the only one who could really answer that. That night, my ex called me. I almost did not pick up, but curiosity won. He launched into a speech about how fatherhood was still really important to him, how he had always imagined having kids, how it would be a shame to let all the work we had done go to waste. He said he had talked to someone at the clinic who told him it would be possible, with my consent, for him to move forward on his own. He talked about it like a business proposal, listing pros and cons, reassuring me that I would not be obligated to anything financially or emotionally. Listening to him talk about using our embryos without me felt like having someone calmly discuss taking the foundation of a house you built together and using it to build a different house down the street without your name on the mailbox. I let him finish his pitch. Then I told him no. Not gently, not with a lot of explanation, just a clear, solid no. He did not like that. He accused me of being selfish, of wanting to punish him, of playing God with his future. He said I used to be more empathetic, that the hormones and the divorce had made me cold. He tried to say that any issues between us did not change the fact that we had good genetic material. That phrase made my skin crawl. We were not breeding dogs. This was not about genetics. This was about the fact that he had already shown me exactly who he was when it came to loyalty and respect. The next week, I went back to the clinic. Walking through those doors again felt like walking into a flashback. The same waiting room chairs, the same bland artwork on the walls, the same smell of disinfectant and coffee. I sat with a counselor and explained the situation. She did not look surprised. I got the sense that she had seen variations of this story more times than she could count. She walked me through the paperwork to revoke my consent for any future use of our embryos or my eggs, and pointed out the lines in the original contract that said nothing could be done without both signatures. Signing those forms felt like a funeral for a future I had already mourned, but it also felt like reclaiming something I had lost. A few weeks later, the clinic confirmed everything was closed out on my end, with no loose strings left for him to pull and a note on file that they would not move a muscle without hearing from me directly. The confirmation came as a dry 2-page form letter full of codes and storage fee language that made my eyes cross. But the bottom line was simple. Nothing was going anywhere without me. They also explained that the remaining embryos would eventually be discarded instead of sitting in storage limbo forever, which I agreed to even though it made my stomach twist. I cried in the car afterward, big ugly sobs that fogged up the windows. Not because I doubted my decision, but because it was another layer of letting go. I called my therapist, left a rambling voicemail, drove home and made myself tea. My life had shrunk in some ways, but it also felt more honest. I had fewer illusions, fewer what-ifs. Painful, but clean. My ex did not stop pushing right away. There were more texts, long emails where he tried to sound logical and reasonable, attempts to use a mutual friend as a mediator. I blocked his number. I told the friend politely that I did not want to be in the middle of his dreams of fatherhood and that he needed to find a therapist instead of a loophole. Eventually, after one too many late-night calls from unknown numbers that I refused to answer, I talked to a lawyer. The lawyer reviewed the clinic contract with me, confirmed he could not legally move forward without my consent, and suggested sending a formal letter reminding him of that, and if necessary, pursuing a restraining order. It turned out the letter was enough. The calls stopped. Time did its slow, messy work. I built a routine in my new place. I still worked at the clinic, but I started carving out more time for my organizing side business. What had started as a few weekend gigs grew into something real. I made a basic website, posted before and after photos on a social media app, and clients started referring me to their friends. There was something deeply satisfying about walking into a chaotic garage or overflowing closet and knowing I could turn it into something that made sense. It was control on a small scale, in a life that had felt out of control for a long time. There were lonely nights, of course. Nights when I lay on my new couch with takeout containers on the coffee table, watching some show that did not require emotional investment, and wondered if I had made everything too hard on myself. On those nights, my brain would replay the good memories from my marriage, conveniently leaving out the group chat. I missed the version of him who made me laugh while we brushed our teeth, who brought me coffee in bed on weekends, who kissed the inside of my wrist for no reason. Then I would open the folder of screenshots, not to torture myself, but to remind myself that those two versions were the same person. Around 2 years after the divorce, the universe decided to send me a small petty gift. I did not ask for it, but I will not lie and say it did not feel satisfying. I was at a coffee shop waiting for a client when I ran into a mutual acquaintance I had not seen in a while. We did the usual small talk. How are you? What are you up to? That kind of thing. Then, casually, he mentioned my ex. Apparently, the group of friends that had once been the center of his universe had slowly fallen apart. One had moved for his wife's job. Another had become a father and disappeared into diapers and sleep deprivation. The event planner, the one who used to brag the loudest, had found out his partner had been cheating on him for months. My ex, without his core group and without a marriage to play the devoted husband in, was drifting. The acquaintance said he had seen him alone at a bar they all used to go to, nursing a drink and staring at his phone like he was waiting for it to become a time machine. He told me he really messed up with you, the acquaintance said. Said you were the one that got away. I rolled my eyes so hard I almost gave myself a headache. The one that got away makes it sound romantic, like a missed chance instead of what it was. A man refusing to treat someone with basic respect until it was too late. By that point, my own life had opened up in ways I had not expected. My business had grown enough that I cut down my hours at the clinic, then eventually left it altogether. I still did some admin work part-time for one of my longtime clients, a small business owner who trusted me to keep things organized behind the scenes. But most of my time was spent going from house to house, helping people dig themselves out from under years of accumulated stuff. It was exhausting and strangely healing. I was good at it. People thanked me with tears in their eyes sometimes, and I would drive home feeling like maybe I was not as basic as that group chat had made me out to be. And then, because apparently my life is written by someone who enjoys irony, I met someone new. I was 45 at that point. which felt both too old and somehow way too young to be rebuilding my entire romantic life from scratch. It was not some movie moment with slow motion and music. It was a scheduling mistake. A contractor had double booked a space where I was supposed to be working, and I showed up to find a man standing in the middle of a half-finished office, looking at blueprints like they had betrayed him. He was an architect working on the renovation, and I was there to plan out how the finished spaces would be staged. We got stuck in that weird limbo of, well, I guess we both need this room, and ended up sitting on overturned buckets going over plans together. He asked smart questions about how people actually used space, not just how it looked. He listened when I talked, not just waiting for his turn to speak. He made a joke about how everyone thinks architects only care about appearances, and there was something self-aware in it that I appreciated. We kept running into each other as the project went on. He would show up with coffee for both of us, apologize for the noise his team was making, ask how my other jobs were going. He learned my schedule without being creepy about it. One day, after we had spent an hour arguing playfully about open shelving versus closed cabinets, he asked if I wanted to get dinner sometime. I hesitated. My stomach did that weird flip that is equal parts excitement and nausea. I told him I had been divorced recently enough that I was still figuring myself out. He nodded, said he understood, said he was not in a rush. He did not push, which was new for me. We started with lunch instead, then another lunch, then a walk after we both finished work early one day. Little by little, we built something that felt nothing like my marriage. There was no audience. When he made me laugh, it was just for me, not for a group of men waiting to rate his performance. He met my friends slowly. He met my parents eventually. Watching my dad shake his hand was strangely emotional. My dad did not say much after that first meeting, but later, in the car, he said, "He seems solid," which, coming from him, might as well have been a sonnet. My mother liked him because he helped without being asked when she insisted on cooking a big meal and started pulling too many pans out of the cupboard. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. For the moment when he would make a joke at my expense in front of his friends, or roll his eyes when I talked about something that mattered to me. It did not come. That does not mean he was perfect. He left dishes in the sink sometimes, snored when he was exhausted, and got stubborn when he was stressed. But when we argued, he did not use my vulnerabilities as ammunition. He did not run to a group chat to turn our disagreements into content. The first time I told him about the messages, I expected him to recoil. I expected him to think I was holding on to old drama, that I was too damaged for a healthy relationship. Instead, he looked horrified on my behalf and said, "I am so sorry he did that to you." Then he asked what I needed from him to feel safe. I did not have a neat answer, but just being asked the question was new and kind of overwhelming. We had been together for almost a year when my past and present collided in a way I had secretly feared. A mutual acquaintance saw us out one night, sitting on the patio of a restaurant laughing over something dumb. A few days later, that acquaintance apparently mentioned to my ex that I was seeing someone new, that I seemed happy, that the man with me seemed decent. I know this because my ex showed up at my workspace again like a ghost who had not gotten the message that his season was over. He looked older. Lines around his mouth that had not been there before, hair a little thinner, posture a little less upright. He hovered near the entrance until I acknowledged him, like he knew he did not have the right to just walk in. I stepped outside with him because the last thing I needed was him making a scene in front of clients. He started with an apology, the kind that sounded rehearsed but also raw. He said losing me had forced him to look at himself, that therapy had made him realize how much of his identity had been tied up in being the funny guy, the charming one, the one everyone wanted to be around. He said he had used me as a prop in that performance and he hated himself for it now. He admitted that he had forwarded my private messages to his friends sometimes when he wanted sympathy or laughs. Hearing him say it out loud made me feel physically sick, even though I had already suspected it. He told me he had watched his friend group fall apart and realized that the people he had sacrificed our marriage for were not actually there for him. He said that when his own life got hard, most of them disappeared, too caught up in their own messes to care about his. He told me he missed me, not just the version of me that kept everything running smoothly, but me, the person. He asked if there was any chance, any tiny possibility, that we could start over. For a moment, a very small one, I saw us as we had been in the beginning. Two younger, less bruised people sitting on my old couch eating cheap takeout and planning a future that looked nothing like what actually happened. Then that image flickered and I saw him hunched over his phone, thumbs flying, typing out lines about how he deserved better than me. Both versions were real. I had to choose which one I believed more. I told him no. Not in a dramatic, screaming way, just in a calm, steady voice that did not leave room for argument. I told him I was seeing someone who treated me with the kind of basic respect that should not have to be negotiated. I told him I hoped he had genuinely learned something, not just about me, but about himself. I also told him that whatever growth he had done did not automatically earn him a spot back in my life. He tried to argue that our history meant something, that no one would ever understand me the way he did. I almost laughed. The version of me he knew was the one who swallowed insults and laughed at jokes that hurt her, who bent herself into whatever shape made him the most comfortable. The woman standing in front of him was not that person anymore. He was right about one thing, though. Our history meant something. It meant I had a very clear blueprint of what I did not want ever again. I walked him to the door, thanked him for apologizing, and told him not to contact me again. It was weirdly anticlimactic. No dramatic music, no tears, just two people standing in a parking lot under harsh afternoon light, saying goodbye in a way that should have happened long before. About a year after that, I got married again. It was small and quiet, just close friends and family in a little venue with simple decorations. I wore a dress that made me feel comfortable, not like I was auditioning for a magazine spread. My husband and I wrote our own vows. Nothing overly poetic, just honest promises about listening, about trying, about not turning each other into punchlines. My dad cried more than I had ever seen him cry. At one point, he pulled me aside and said, "This feels different." And I knew exactly what he meant. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. We got a little help from a specialist, and it worked. This was not some leftover plan from before. It was a fresh start with a new doctor, a new approach, and a partner who was actually on my side this time. They labeled me high risk on every chart and booked more appointments than I thought my calendar could hold, which scared me but also made it feel weirdly real. I was 47, sitting on the edge of my own bathtub, realizing I was about to start a chapter I had once convinced myself would never happen for me. I almost did not believe it. I stared at the test in my bathroom like it might change if I looked away and looked back again. When I told my husband, I blurted it out in this awkward rush because I was so nervous. His eyes got wide. Then he smiled. Then he pulled me into a hug and just stood there with me for a long time. My first instinct was fear. Not of being a mother exactly, but of repeating patterns. I was terrified that something would snap in him under stress and he would become cruel. That I would find out years from now that he had been venting about me in some secret chat. I was scared that I did not know how to be in a family without losing myself. I said all of that to him one night, sitting on the couch with my feet in his lap. He did not tell me I was being irrational. He did not tell me to just get over it. He said, "Okay, what can I do to help you feel safe?" And then he listened while I tried to figure out the answer. We went to a few sessions with a counselor together. Not because we were in trouble, but because I knew my old wounds would not magically disappear just because I was with someone better. In those sessions, I said out loud things I had only ever thought in the shower or right before falling asleep. Things about feeling like a backup option, about being compared to other women, about how deeply words can cut when they are said to an audience. He listened. Sometimes he looked angry on my behalf. Sometimes he looked sad. But he stayed in the conversation. He did not flee to a screen. I still have moments when my brain plays old reels. When I hear men at another table in a restaurant making jokes about their wives or girlfriends, I tense up. When someone teases their partner in a way that feels a little too sharp, I feel that old urge to shrink. But now, instead of swallowing it, I name it. I talk about it. I remind myself that I am not overreacting, that my instincts are trying to protect me. People sometimes ask if I regret the way I ended my first marriage. If I think maybe I could have handled it differently, stayed, worked through it, given him more chances. I understand why they ask. Divorce makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to think about their own relationships and where their deal breakers might be. My answer is always the same. No, I do not regret it. I regret that it had to get that far. I regret that I ignored my instincts for so long. But I do not regret choosing myself. If there is anything I took from all of this, it is that people show you who they are in the spaces where they think you will never look. The way someone talks about you when you are not there matters more than the way they perform affection in front of you. The jokes they make, the stories they tell, the details they share without your consent, all of that adds up to a picture that is a lot more accurate than any caption on a cute photo. I cannot go back and tell my younger self to walk away the first time she felt like a punchline. I cannot make her stop laughing along just to keep the peace. All I can do is honor the fact that, eventually, she stopped. That she packed a suitcase, moved onto a friend's couch, signed a stack of painful papers, and built a life where she was not the joke anymore. The baby kicking inside me as I tell this story to you, in my head, while I fold tiny onesies and argue with my husband about baby names that do not sound ridiculous, is not the reward for my suffering. She is not proof that everything happens for a reason. She is just a person who will one day have her own stories, her own heartbreaks, her own choices to make about what she will and will not tolerate. My job is not to make sure she never feels pain. My job is to show her, by example, that she is allowed to walk away from anything and anyone who makes her feel like she is lucky to be tolerated. I will never know if my ex truly understands what he lost, or if he just misses the convenience of having someone who made his life easier while he made hers smaller. That is not my responsibility anymore. My responsibility is to the life I have now, to the partner who chooses me without needing an audience, to the baby who will one day call me mom, and to the version of myself who finally picked herself. So yeah, my marriage ended because of screenshots. Because for once, the version of the story I had been feeling in my gut had receipts to back it up. I am not ashamed of that. I am grateful to the part of me that, sitting in a car in a parking lot on a random Tuesday, decided that my life was worth burning down before I let myself become someone who just got used to being disrespected.